Have you ever considered how a single paper-thin invention completely altered the trajectory of human psychology and global civilization? We tend to view history through the lens of grand wars, industrial revolutions, and technological marvels. But sitting quietly in the shadows of human progress is a simple barrier, an invention that decoupled our most primal instinct. To understand its true impact, we have to strip it away entirely. Imagine a reality where the condom was never conceived. No animal intestines in ancient Rome, no chemically treated linen in the Renaissance, no latex in the 20th century. In this timeline, every act of physical human connection carries an inescapable, absolute gamble. The immediate assumption is that the world would simply be overflowing with people. A population crisis so severe it would trigger mass starvation and resource wars. But human behavior is incredibly adaptive, and biology is unforgiving. A world without a physical barrier against disease would not necessarily be a crowded one, it would be a terrified one. Throughout history, the true predator of humanity has not been other humans or wild beasts, it has been microscopic. Let us travel back to the late 15th century. A mysterious and devastating illness sweeps across Europe. It is sudden, disfiguring, and fatal. Today, we know it is syphilis, but back then, it was known simply as the Great Pox. In our world, an Italian anatomist named Gabriele Fallopio recognized the terrifying spread of this disease and invented a medicated linen sheath to protect against it. It was one of the first recorded medical uses of a condom. But what if Fallopio had never made that connection? What if no one did? Without that first line of defense, the Great Pox does not just ravage armies and royal courts. It fundamentally rewrites the social fabric of the globe. Because the disease is untreatable and protection does not exist, paranoia becomes the dominant human emotion. The Renaissance, a period defined by the explosion of art, exploration, and humanism, grinds to a halt under the weight of a silent plague. Travel and trade become synonymous with a death sentence. To welcome a stranger is to invite destruction. The great cities of the world, built on the convergence of different cultures and ideas, transform into isolated, suspicious fortresses. As generations pass, this fear begins to alter human psychology at an evolutionary level. Think about how humans form bonds. Physical touch is ingrained in our biology to release oxytocin, to build trust, to soothe anxiety. But in a world where intimacy is a game of Russian roulette, those biological wires get crossed. Touch becomes a trigger for cortisol, the stress hormone. Our nervous systems adapt to view closeness as a threat. The very nature of romance is permanently distorted. Courtship becomes clinical, heavily regulated by the state or religious institutions to ensure survival. Unregulated affection is not just frowned upon, it is criminalized as a danger to public health. This brings us to the structure of society itself. Without the ability to separate intimacy from reproduction and disease, the concept of family becomes fiercely tribal. Strict class divisions deepen. The wealthy isolate themselves in highly controlled environments, marrying only within thoroughly vetted circles. Medical screening, no matter how primitive, becomes the most lucrative industry on the planet. Corporate rivalries emerge, not over land or gold, but over secret remedies and the promise of safety. Entire economies are built on the business of fear and biological security. But what about the population? Without the ability to reliably plan families, wouldn't numbers skyrocket? Initially, yes. Families would grow uncontrollably, placing an immense burden on agricultural systems. But this boom is temporary. Because every new child born into poverty is another vector for illness. Child mortality rates skyrocket, and the maternal death rate becomes a global tragedy. The human life expectancy plummets. Society falls into a brutal cyclical rhythm, a massive surge in births, followed by catastrophic demographic collapses driven by unchecked rolling pandemics. By the time humanity reaches the industrial age, the global landscape looks vastly different. The Industrial Revolution requires densely packed cities, millions of workers living shoulder to shoulder. In a world utterly defenseless against transmitted infections, these cities are literal death traps. The massive factories and sprawling urban centers we know today could never exist in the same way. Progress would have to be decentralized. Innovation slows down because the free exchange of human capital is simply too dangerous. And then comes the 20th century, bringing with it entirely new biological threats. When modern viral epidemics emerge in this alternate timeline, they sweep through populations with absolute impunity. Governments, terrified of total collapse, would enforce draconian isolation measures. The concept of personal freedom is sacrificed entirely for the sake of species continuation. Quarantine is not an emergency protocol. It is a permanent way of life. Yet, even in this bleak reality, human nature remains human nature. The desire to connect is inextinguishable. People would still risk everything for a moment of closeness, defying laws and common sense, driven by an instinct older than civilization itself. This creates a deeply tragic underground world where love and affection are treated as dangerous acts of rebellion. The emotional toll of this reality is almost unimaginable. It forces us to reconsider the profound significance of that simple, often overlooked barrier. It is far more than a medical device or a tool for family planning. It is a technological shield that allowed human beings to reclaim their biology. It permitted the sprawling, interconnected, intensely social world we navigate today. It allowed art, culture, and progress to flourish without the constant looming threat of biological consequence. We rarely pause to think about how much of our freedom is built on such a fragile foundation. But when you remove it from the timeline, you realize that without it, humanity would not just be sicker or fewer in number. We would be fundamentally lonelier, trapped in a world where our deepest instinct to love is also our greatest vulnerability.